This video will look at the Lost World by the scientists who are a part of the Alliance. This is part of the revealing of the Jedi and a new era of hope.
But what if there were others, just like us, millions of years ago? How do we even know that we're the first advanced civilization to call the planet Earth home? And if there have been others, what kind of traces have they left for us to find? Then where else could we find traces of a potentially extinct civilization? And what can we learn to make sure we avoid the same fate?
Humans are believed to be the most technologically advanced civilization that's ever set foot on Earth, or really anywhere in the solar system. But are we the first? Could there have been an advanced civilization that walked the Earth millions or even billions of years ago and then died out long ago, their technology and structures lost to the eons? How can we know? Could we know if we're actually the first advanced civilization to live here on Earth? If another civilization came before us, how could we find them? This is a question that Dr. Jason Wright, an exoplanet researcher and associate professor at Penn State University, posed in his 2017 paper titled Prior Indigenous Technological Species. And the paper is all about where we might find evidence for previous advanced civilizations here in the solar system, and what might have happened to them.
Are World Heritage Sites. Why is access and legitimate scientific research being systematically restricted? Much of ancient Egypt remains undiscovered. Satellite images show traces of buried structures that are still not excavated. In the name of protecting sites, are Egyptian authorities preventing us from learning the truth about our ancient past? Despite strict regulations on what kind of research is allowed, there is still an extraordinary amount of evidence that shows that the ancient Egyptians had knowledge that has been lost.
We don't have the technology to build the pyramids now. Not even close. We're not the most evolved we've ever been. And that is one of the blinders that has stopped us from imagining that the ancients could have been far smarter than us.
Hakim Awian was raised by indigenous elders who lived in the area of the Band of Peace. Having preserved the ancient Suf language, stories were passed down generation after generation. Fragments of knowledge from the ancient past were thus preserved.
If my colleague, the scholar, who learned to say that the Egyptians have a piece of rope, put it around a block of stone, at least 60-ton weight, and pull and pushed by animals and run on wooden blocks. This is what the scholars are saying.
We may never be exactly sure how the pyramids were built. Yet we can begin to reconstruct our understanding of the culture living in the Golden Age and their values.
All workers are willingly pyramids builder. This is a qualified people of architecture, engineers, and they deal with all the power, like cutting stones, transfer it and use it. And that is clear, and not only in the pyramids, and in the temple walls, and many places you can see that clearly.
There are clues throughout Egypt that point to knowledge of high technology. A fascinating thing occurred when a chunk of stone recently fell off a lintel at Abydos Temple, and controversial images resembling a helicopter and other advanced-looking vehicles were revealed under the stone. It would seem that the images were covered in the distant past when things were changing politically in Egypt. Nowadays, Egyptian tour guides are explicitly instructed not to point these out to tourists. The Egyptological explanation is that it is multiple hieroglyphs overlapping from distant kings' inscriptions, But, like many things in Egypt, the explanation is still debatable. Another controversial object that Egyptologists merely deem impossible is the artifact commonly known as the Baghdad Battery, that generates a mild electrical charge. Similar ancient artifacts that match these objects have been found in Egypt. We can't say for certain, but it would appear that the Egyptians documented the existence of these artifacts as well. Recreations of these objects have been made and have successfully created electric current. Also noteworthy are strange representations of objects that resemble light bulbs, found in the crypts at Dendera. There was no natural light inside these underground crypts, but we see no soot from torches or oil lamps, the only lights we know the ancients used. Could the ancient Egyptians have had their own source of electrical power? If nothing else, the ancients had to cut, move, and lift massive stone blocks that would challenge our engineers today. What was their secret? We automatically assume that ancient structures are for ceremonial and religious purposes. Maybe the pyramids served a completely different function than previously imagined.
There's been lots of speculation about what the pyramids were actually built for. The most accepted notion is that they were tombs.
Much more complicated situation with the Great Pyramid than most people understand or most people believe, including a lot of Egyptologists who see it simply as a tomb for the pharaoh Khufu.
That idea is childish for the following reason. I mean, it's obvious, we don't find mummies in the pyramids.
And of course, not finding a single mummy in any of the pyramids doesn't seem to deter the people who think that that's what they were for.
Yes, there's something that's sometimes referred to as a stone sarcophagus or coffer in it, a beautiful granite structure, but that doesn't prove definitively in my mind that it was ever actually used for a tomb. It may have been used for many other purposes.
Pyramids were built not as a tomb. There are some pyramids built in a different construction, like the one in Saqqara, Step Pyramid, that is tomb.
Look at the obvious difference in construction between the Step Pyramid and the Great Pyramid. The difference in style of construction would logically indicate they were built in different time frames. The buildings we know to be tombs, like the Step Pyramid at Saqqara and the flat-topped mastabas also at Saqqara, are very different from the smooth-sided pyramids at Giza and Dashur. Typically in Egypt, older constructions are built of larger stones. New constructions are built of smaller stones. Also, in archaeology, older structures are deeper. Newer structures are found closer to the surface. Every other tomb that has been found is highly decorated with names of the occupant. The inside of these pyramids seems solely functional and not decorative at all.
But if we stop altogether and say, okay, if they weren't tombs, what were they?
Ever since scientists have been studying the Great Pyramids there at Giza, there has been speculation that they may have been energy generators, some kind of power plants. And of course,
but the Great Pyramid has the precision of a machine, and so when you consider it as a machine, you see that there are certain functions that each part of the pyramid performs. The subterranean chamber is evidence itself, and it has been demonstrated by an engineer by the name of John Cadman, who created a model of the subterranean chamber, and by feeding water in it, the chamber itself seems to cause some very unusual reactions in the pyramid.
The water would rush down the shaft of the Great Pyramid down to the subterranean chamber, which was about 330 feet. It would bypass a valve, and then the valve would slam shut, and it would cause a shock wave to be sent up the Great Pyramid itself, and then it would shoot towards the ceiling that was directly below the King's Chamber.
The granite is the same material that you would use in a microphone or a telephone. It vibrates through the introduction of sound, and it emits electrons. Well, you take that phenomenon and you control it inside the Great Pyramid, then you have a machine that can vibrate that granite as much as an earthquake would vibrate granite in the earth and create electromagnetic energy.
Christopher Dunn's theories indicates that the Great Pyramid was sending microwave signal to a satellite. Christopher Dunn's theory will change forever the way we look at the ancient Egyptians, their civilization, and where they came from, and where they got their knowledge and technology.
Where it was due. The Egyptians certainly knew about electricity as a basic concept, and they knew enough about electricity to use animals like this to treat people with epilepsy and to provide temporary pain relief. But we're going to take this one step further. There are some unexplained features in the Great Pyramid, and some have suggested that it may have produced electricity. Specifically, it's been proposed that the pyramid may have served as a Lord Kelvin's thunderstorm device. What immediately stands out to me is the Grand Gallery. Its purpose isn't clear. If you look inside of it, you'll see a long, tall, inclined room, and there are these ledges on either side of the walkway. We also see alternating short and long slots on those ledges. There's a groove cut into the walls which span the entire space. At the top of the Grand Gallery, there's an opening which connects to a space over the King's Chamber. More spaces were discovered over it via dynamite archaeology. When the second relieving chamber was opened, they found a fine black powder evenly spread on the floor. The powder was later identified as insect carcasses. These spaces have long been called relieving chambers, as it's believed that they relieve the pressure over the King's Chamber. But notice that the Queen's Chamber is farther down in the pyramid, and you would think that the pressure would be even greater there, and yet the Queen's Chamber has no such relieving chambers. There are also these shafts. These are completely unique to the Great Pyramid. In all of the time that we've spent studying ancient Egypt, we've found no analog for them. Here's what we do know. The King's Chamber shafts extend all the way to the outside, whereas the Queen's Chamber shafts don't. The Queen's Chamber shafts are blocked by these blocking stones. Another curious feature about these blocking stones are these copper pins. We have no idea what their purpose is. Unlike the yellow limestone, which makes up the bulk of the pyramid, white limestone was used for the slabs and the surrounding area. The only other place that we've seen white limestone used on the pyramid are the casing stones. Few casing stones survive today, many of which were taken for use on buildings elsewhere. The mainstream ideas about the shafts don't make a lot of sense. Regarding the constellation alignment theory, the shafts don't point to certain stars as once believed. Also, you have to ask yourself why the pathway to the stars would be needed in the first place. The Egyptians believe the soul isn't blocked by physical objects, so this doesn't seem very likely. Also, with the air shaft theory, other pyramids don't have air shafts, so why would they be needed here if they weren't needed before or after this pyramid? Likewise, the blocking stones have been attributed to a symbolic doorway for the spirit to cross to the afterlife. While it is true that the Egyptians did put false doors on tombs to allow the spirit to receive offerings, they don't resemble what we see in the Great Pyramid. Also, structures with false doors don't hide them in shafts. Further, false doors are almost always located on western walls. These shafts are oriented north and south. They almost certainly are not false doors. Another oddity is the subterranean chamber. Why would the builders go through such great lengths to make a chamber and yet leave it unfinished? Now that you know the basics of the internal anomalies of the pyramid, let's take a look at an electrical generator that the ancient Egyptians may have known about. This simple device has no moving parts, just falling water. Just because it's simple doesn't mean it's not impressive though. This little device can generate thousands of volts of electricity. Here's what's going on into the Great Pyramid, and we'll see if those anomalous features make more sense. Let's start at the Grand Gallery. To get ideal results, we'll want wide streams, which means that the space needs to be fairly tall. The larger diameter streams, the more voltage that we can create. Just like in our experiment earlier, we'll want to insulate the buckets from the wet floor. Otherwise, the voltage will leak. This may explain the ledges on either side of the Grand Gallery. The room and the ledges are both sloped, so you'll need some way of keeping the buckets from tipping over. How about we use platforms to create a horizontal ledge for them? Remember that there are 28 slots on either side, so this would accommodate 14 platforms and buckets on each side. In 2017, scientists detected the big void directly above the Grand Gallery. For our machine to work, this chamber would be needed, and the placement is ideal. What purpose could these shafts serve for our machine? Remember that they are completely unique to the Great Pyramid, and we have no context in which to place them. For our machine, we could use them to route wiring to the outside of the pyramid. The angles are close to optimal to have the shortest distance from the chamber to the exterior of the pyramid. The goal appears to be that they were trying to set the exit at the same height. I suspect that the King's Chamber shafts also had slabs with copper fittings, but in this case they'd be located at the edge of the pyramid.
Sites occur all over the world. Is their placement random, or does the location of these sites reveal yet another hidden layer of ancient knowledge?
One thing I found looking at different megalithic structures over a few continents and numerous places around the world, overwhelmingly these places, the pyramids, the Stonehenges, etc. of the world, were placed on ground where an unusual type of geology naturally concentrates the regular daily natural electromagnetic fluctuations that occur everywhere on the Earth each day.
This is the real world, led by the real guardians of peace and justice. Nothing will be hidden and everything you see will be a new find or evidence. This is the path of the real world Jedi, as known in Egypt, and Knights Templar, that the saga Lucas wrote about, is coming to life.